Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of MALN Opinion Plus. This is a space for our opinions where we talk about current events and questions the Latino community is curious about. Today, we're joined by Jetta Bernier, Executive Director of MassKids, a state-based child advocacy organization currently working to prevent child abuse in the state of Massachusetts and around the United States. Hi, Jetta. Thanks for joining.
Hello, Diego. So good to join you again.
So good. So when we last caught up with you in April, almost 6 months ago, you told us a lot about your work. Could you just give us an update about what you've been doing over the summer and since then in the fall?
Oh my, well, we've been very, very busy, particularly since we've been promoting a package of prevention bills at the State House. These are bills that would work within schools and youth organizations to prevent child sexual abuse from ever happening. We've been working with legislators to craft legislation that we think is the best in the country. We've been attending public hearings, providing testimony to the committees on education, on children and families. And just yesterday, as a matter of fact, we provided intensive testimony to the Judiciary Committee, which is reviewing some of these major bills. So we've got our mantra out there. It's called Pass the Prevention Package. We've been pushing for these bills for a few years, and we think this is the year not to pass them piecemeal, but to pass the entire package, because as we have said, if Massachusetts can do this, we believe that our children will be the safest of any children in any state in the country.
Wow. So could you tell me a bit about what goes into crafting legislation like that, and what are some of the key points that you're trying to hit when creating it?
Well, preventing child sexual abuse is absolutely possible. But a lot of people think that it's just this terrible, awful, social problem that we're never going to get a handle on. But that's not the case. There is actually a movement to prevent child sexual abuse that's been building in the country for at least a decade or more. And so we've begun to understand that one of the first things we have to do is to talk about it. So public awareness and education is really key. And what we've also learned is that child sexual abuse occurs in every socioeconomic group, in every group in terms of education, in every community. And we are sad to know that sexual abuse happens not only in people's homes with relatives and others involved, but also in schools and in youth organizations. In fact, in that regard, we've been very concerned about the Department of Education, the federal DOE, their report that indicates 10% or 4.5 million American school children right now report that they have experienced some kind of inappropriate sexual contact, direct or indirect, by an adult in their school. And usually, in a number of cases, it's the teachers or coaches or other school employees. So that's a pretty startling statistic. And I think what it tells us, if you do the math, there are 100,000 Massachusetts students who may be experiencing these kinds of inappropriate behaviors, simply not allowed, should not be allowed. So we've been working with legislators. There are a number of state legislators who have experienced childhood sexual abuse themselves, some of whom have come out publicly. And one particular individual, Senator Joan Lovely from Salem, who has been very vocal and quite a leader in terms of saying, we've got to talk about this. We know it's uncomfortable, but we got to talk about it anyway. Mm-hmm. And so we've been working with her, Representative MaLN and Representative Blaze in the western part of the state, Representative Gordon in the Woburn area, with a lot of really good, committed child advocates. So if you'd like, I can give you a quick little thumbnail sketch of what these bills would do, because I think that's what your viewers might want to know about.
Yeah,
okay?
I would really appreciate that.
Okay, so one of the bills would actually mandate that all school employees are educated about child sexual abuse prevention. I don't mean just about reporting it if you see it. I'm talking about prevention, how to identify the kinds of boundary violating behaviors that, if I'm not interrupted, could lead to illegal activity. For example, taking a 15-year-old student out to dinner on Saturday night for a quiet romantic evening is not illegal, but it is a violation of the student-adult relationship, and it is a boundary violation that should be prevented, because it can escalate to more unfortunate situations. The bill, interestingly, would also call for the adoption of a code of conduct because right now, every school has a different code. Some of them focus only on harassment, only on child related harassment as opposed to adult to child. So this bill, if it's passed, would really be the most comprehensive bill in the country to address this issue within schools. So we're really excited about that. Another aspect of this, Diego, is, when people come to apply for positions in schools, they usually get a background check, maybe a national fingerprint check even. The problem with that is that in about 80% or more of cases in which a child molester was identified within a school, they already had a clean background check, because the game here on the part of individuals who abuse, who are true pedophiles, who are serial abusers, is that they don't want to get caught. So they become very cunning, manipulative, put themselves in places where they won't be identified as an abuser, where they can build trust, not only with the child, but with the family, with the institution. And so what we're saying is, yeah, you've got to do the background checks, but it's just not enough. And so what we're proposing to do, which is being done in about, a number of states, particularly Pennsylvania, which is really a model, is that when you go for the interview, you have to respond to a certain number of questions. Have you ever been investigated for any kind of sexual misconduct? Was your license ever revoked or surrendered as a result of the findings of that investigation? Can we reach out to all your previous school employers and ask them about your own personnel history around children? So, in places like Pennsylvania, if you can lie and say no, but if you don't get permission to contact other schools and to do so and share information without any legal, barrier, you can't even proceed in the interview.
It's
Okay.
like an immediate red flag.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, and then also another thing that's been happening, and we saw this in the Catholic Church, unfortunately, the notion of passing someone from one parish to another without notifying the parish that this was a dangerous person. The same kind of dynamic has been happening in schools around the country. That is, if an individual is involved in misconduct, and it's not at the level where you have to report it right away to law enforcement or to the Child Protective Services, there will be some pressure on the person to just resign, just leave us alone, go someplace else. We don't want you here. The problem with that is that it then sends this person without any accountability to another school where they can be employed in another town over, or even in another state. So this practice has been termed passing the trash. I'm not sure I really like that, because 99% of those who are in schools are not trash. They are the heroes in our children's lives. Okay, but in any case, this particular bill would prohibit that, and it would prohibit a confidentiality agreement to kind of keep things quiet. Okay.
Wow.
Another really interesting bill has to do with the fact that if some individual abusers are very savvy, and so they will groom a child up until the age of 16, when the child becomes at the age of consent. In other words, they will do all kinds of things. Oh, you're such a great writer. I'm going to give you private lessons, or, boy, I'm going to, work with you and give you special, privileges because you're so mature. All kinds of things. I'll give you gifts, but it's not sexual. But as soon as the child turns 16, when they feel they can be protected legally, that is when the sexual relationship begins. And the sad part here is that because those who abuse children are often very clear, they don't want to be caught, they will manipulate the child into thinking that, oh, we have a really special relationship. We're in a romantic relationship. I'm going to leave my partner, as soon as you graduate from high school, things like that. And so when these cases are discovered, whether a parent finds an inappropriate text or image on the kid's cell phone or something like that, or the rumors start to spread that something's going on, in some cases, the children refuse to press charges. They refuse to participate in any kind of police investigation because they believe that it was a consensual relationship. And so what this bill would do would be essentially to say, if you are under the age of 19 and a high school student, if you're under the 22 or under because you're a special needs student, if you engage in a sexual relation, you are not capable. That's the point of the law. It says you are incapable of providing consent to a person who's in a position of authority in your school, in your organization. And if that person who is the abuser eventually finally somehow gets to a civil or a criminal case, they cannot claim that the age of consent law is a defense for their charges. Okay, so it's the Chiefs of Police Association here in Massachusetts has been complaining about this loophole for several years. They've had actual cases where their hands have been tied because the child, believing they're in love essentially, refused to press charges, and so nobody can do anything except to urge the person to resign. But even then, there's no accountability. They can go on to another school and target some additional children. So anyway, those are the key elements of the package that I was talking about. So
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that so in depth with us. It's so unfortunate and frankly scary that this is such a huge part of our society today. Can
right.
you tell me a little bit about how the work that you're doing here in Massachusetts applies to possibly on a larger scale in states outside or in other parts of the United
Yeah,
States?
well, related to the legislative efforts that we've been talking about, when we were crafting this legislation, we wanted to look around the country to say, well, who's got a model law? We don't want to write it from scratch. What has been the experience of various states? So in 2015, we started to do some investigating around this and issued a preliminary report. But this past June, we issued a 116-page report called A Call to Action for Policymakers and Advocates, Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Legislation in the States. We were able to identify in all 50 states whether they have bills that encourage or mandate education in schools on this topic, whether there are screening protocols in those various states, whether they have age of consent, loophole corrections, all of this stuff. And so we've created, what we discovered is a unique report in the country. No one else is tracking this. And so in November, we actually had 3 webinars over the course of 3 weeks in which we invited people around the country to come and learn about the data that we gathered and to learn about the specific provisions of these different laws that we recommend heartily. Okay. And it was very, very successful. I think we had 25 states that participated.
Wow.
So it's when I say to legislators and the media, excuse me, if Massachusetts passes this package, we will be able to essentially be seen as a model state that is doing the most to prevent sexual abuse from happening in the first place.
That's great.
Yeah,
So could you, just coming up on time here, could you tell me
sure.
a little bit about how people in Massachusetts or outside could get involved with MassKids and other organizations like it in their communities?
Yes. Well, we're very action oriented. So a couple of things I would recommend. If you would like to learn more about the legislative issues that I've spoken about, you can go to enoughAbuse.org. They can learn about the bills. They can very easily send a letter to their legislator urging passage. So enoughAbuse.org. They can download the report that I mentioned. And if they go to pledgetoprevent.org, they can actually select a pledge that will give them very specific instructions and resources so that they can do something concrete to prevent sexual abuse in their home or in their community, in their school. So it's a unique kind of action-oriented website. So that's pledgetoprevent.org.
Perfect. And we'll be sure to include that in our online article as well.
Terrific.
I just want to thank you so much again for taking the time out of your day and sharing such important information with us today, Jetta, and
You're
for
so
being our
welcome.
guest here on MALN Opinion Plus,
Thank you, Diego.
of course. All right, and you can join us again next week for another episode. And for more information on our discussion today, check out our web story at malatinonews.com. You can follow us on Twitter at malatinonews and Instagram at ma_Latino News. I'm Diego Viruel, and you're watching MALN Opinion Plus. See you next time.